All right, gang. Welcome aboard once again. It's time for the weekly Mac Forum video chat, July 31st, 2016. I hope you enjoy the tips and tricks that we have for you tonight, as well as some other little tidbits of information. So let's get right into things here. First of all, I want to say welcome to our newest member. It's Eric Stein. We also have a new member who goes by the handle Pro Truck Driver. So welcome to them. And I know we've had several other members join this week. Welcome to all of you guys. One of them has already contributed mightily to a thread about some audio issues. So we're looking forward to contributions from all you guys, as well as any questions that you might have. Um, and keep in mind, speaking of new members and membership and questions and all that neat stuff, keep in mind that if you have a question that you'd like to ask for help, contact us is not really the right section to do it because only the moderators see that. You might want to go ahead and become a member if you haven't already and post it in the appropriate section of the forum. Don't worry if you have trouble figuring out where it should go. We can move it later if you need to, but just try to avoid the contact us area is really if you're having issues with the way the forum is operating, if there's some other kind of problem with the way the forum is operating. So that's really where you see that kind of help. So let's get right on into things today. Got a couple things I want to pass on to you, a few tips and tricks, and as usual, we'll have some things from the forum, and as well as some other issues and tips and tricks and things like that. Um, First of all, let's get right into this. Um, I want to point out this is something that came up in one of the threads. Um, we've had several issues, threads recently related to passwords, setting up passwords, the need for strong passwords, all of those kinds of things. And one of the things that came up in one of those threads is the issue of setting up what are sometimes referred to as uh, EFI or firmware passwords. Okay, and there is a thread going. I'm gonna get that up on the screen here so you can see it. This is a post that was covered in one of the threads. Let me get it up on the other screen for you here. Pop that right up there. This is firmware protection. And the reason that it comes up at all is the following. In the old days, and by old days, I mean prior to 2011, if an owner, let's say he set up a firmware password, he or she set up a firmware password, and then they forgot that password. Well, you couldn't get into the system and you couldn't boot off of a DVD or anything like that unless you knew one little trick about the firmware password. And that was on older Macs, those prior to 2011, what you had to do was if something changed, say the Mac had 4 gig of memory and you took one of the chips out and that cut it down to 2 gig, or you changed something else, then the password would for all practical purposes get bypassed, and you could boot from a DVD or something of that nature. That's not as secure as some people would like. So here's the other side of that coin. As you can see from this is about firmware passwords. And as you dig a little deeper into the article, you can see that it deals with, it reviews the older system that I just briefly, very, very briefly mentioned here. And it also tells you that after beginning with about the 2011 machines, that system of changing something in the physical configuration of the machine does not work anymore. You can't do it that way. It says in the newer systems, you cannot bypass it that way. So here's what has to go on involving resetting the firmware passwords. It involves booting with the option key to display the firmware password prompt, okay? And then pressing control option command shift S to reveal a 33 digit hash. And a hash in this instance means a mix of letters and numbers that contains an identifier. That identifier is tied to your specific machine, your specific motherboard, and a specific chip on that system. Now, this is the problem for some people. What happens is this, then you have to take that hash and you basically submit it to Apple. They put it through a special utility to create a key file that is specific to your machine. That file then gets placed on a USB boot drive and you can boot that way. Now, as you can see, that's a rather convoluted process. And the problem is that the utility for creating the key file is kept at Apple. So you have to go through an authorized service center. And in a lot of cases, they're going to ask that you have proof that you have purchased the machine. So if, for example, um, you purchased a machine used and it has an EFI firmware password, but the previous owner didn't give you the documentation of when they purchased it and where, you may have some issues. I just kind of want you to be aware of that, not only in terms of purchasing used machines, but if you are thinking about setting a firmware password, okay, on your machine. Keep in mind the limitations. Now, you may say, why are they making it so hard? Well, here's the thing, a password process. The whole point of having a password in most cases is to secure something. If you make it easy to circumvent that password, then you, for all practical purposes, you deleted or how should we say, you've defeated the whole purpose of having that password. So I'm going to put the link to this article in the show notes, and it'll give you some idea of what's involved and what you can and cannot do with the new process. I had not really looked into this very much. I was not expecting to find that. I hadn't really looked at the new way of doing firmware passwords because up until very, very recently, I had machines that you could defeat with the old process of changing something in the configuration. And as I say, you can't really do that anymore. All right, so let's look at a couple of other things tonight. And these, the two other tips that I have tonight kind of deal with the issue of making something a little more readable for you. If you are using one of the Retina display uh, iMacs well, really any of the Retina display models, okay? Um, one of the problems people sometimes have is they kind of have to tweak a few things to get it, get things the way they want it. And so here are a couple of tweaks that you might find. This first one comes directly off the Apple site, and I'll have a link to this in your notes. First of all, you might notice that for some applications, some people have discovered that certain applications uh, do not run well on the Retina displays. They don't like the way they look. Okay, so here's what I've got up. I've got the sticky database up here, as you can see, and I'm going to bring up a little bit of something to show you relative to the sticky database. I'm going to go ahead and come down here because I need to get it to show me the application file. So I'm going to just right click right here on the icon, and I want to have it show in the Finder. So it will show me where it is. I'm going to drag this over to my screen so you can see it. Now here is the icon. And let me show you a little trick that may help some um, applications and not others. The difference in display is noticeable to some people, not quite as noticeable to others, and it depends in part on what application it is. First of all, you're going to select that application. As you can see, I've already got it selected right here. You have to do this with the application closed. In other words, if it's already open, quit it. All right, now you've got the app of the main application file selected. Okay, I'm going to do a get info. This is Command I, if you need to see it by command. And as you can see here, it brings up the standard get info dialog here. And in the general section, which I may have to open, you may have to open by clicking this little disclosure triangle, is the option to open it in low resolution mode. Okay, now, right now, I've already got, as you can see, I've got a little stickies database and it's already open. It's in it's already in regular mode. Okay, so now I'm going to quit this for a second. I've already clicked to set it in low resolution mode. Let's see if we notice any noticeable difference with stickies. Okay, and notice in low resolution mode, the print is a little bit bigger. For some applications, this would be sufficient. For some applications, the change is quite noticeable, apparently. So you might want to check that out. And once again, all it involves doing, you make sure the application is not running. You find that the icon for that application in your application folder. Do Command I to bring up the Get Info window, and check this option that says enable open in low resolution. Now, if you ever want to change this, you can, once again, you want to make sure the application is closed. Uh, click and release that option so that it comes up normally. And now when I open it, as you can see, it's a little bit smaller print. It's not quite as noticeable. The difference will be more noticeable in some applications than others. All right, and that gets you the first of our tips on some resolution changes. And here's another one. I stumbled on this um, one day this week. I've been having some issues with one of the monitors that I have hooked up, and I was doing some troubleshooting, and I wanted to show you something that's a good thing to keep handy should you ever need it. I had my system preferences open, and as you can see, I'm already in the displays preference panel, as you can see from there. And here we're looking at the uh, preference pane for my built-in Mac monitor. Now, if you look at this right now, just without doing anything, okay, you will only see when you click scaled. All right, I'm gonna gather my monitors here, the preference pane for both monitors, because I want to show you something that happens sometimes. This one may show both because I've already done this. I'm going to change to scale. Notice, let's look at my Samsung monitor here. I've only got one, two, three, four options in scaled when I click scaled. If I click default, it goes to just the one thing. Watch this. All right, look carefully. Remember, I only had four options the last time I clicked scale. When I click this time, look, I've got several more options here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Looks like about 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, about 16 different resolution options. Now, how did I get all those extra options opened up for me. Here's the catch. What I'm going to do is something very simple. I'm going to go back and put it back in normal mode for a second. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold down the Option key and click Scaled at the same time. That's going to bring up these other things. You have to be doing both. It can't be just the scaled option. It has to be holding the Option key at the same time. Uh, so what I like to do is press that Option key just before I click, and then I click Scaled, and that gives me all of the options that are available for that particular monitor. Now, one word of caution about that, and let's now look at, you can see how many more are listed on my main monitor here. So I've got several choices there as well. Now, one thing I do want to point out to you, every once in a while on some monitors, you may come up with a resolution that it is just really difficult to see for one reason or another. The timing is a little bit messed up, it jitters or something like that. That's going to mean that that's a resolution that's not very well supported with your particular combination of graphics card uh, and monitor. So you'll want to try something different. But if you're having trouble finding a resolution that works for you, that might give you some additional choices. All right, and that gets rid of that, and we can move on to a few other things here. I want to just pass on a couple of other tidbits of information that I ran into this week as I was surfing the web. Uh, this this first story comes from Cult of Mac. They were citing a Bloomberg story that says that the App Store for iOS is the software behind that is going to be rewritten a little bit to take a more active role in recommending software products to you based on what you've purchased in the past and all of that kind of information. It will use your buying history in order to recommend some things that might be of interest to you. All right. So that's going to be something that we'll want to keep a lookout for. It's going to be very useful for some people. I don't know how useful it will be for me. Some of you may find it very useful. Uh, I tend to go through the App Store kind of in phases. Sometimes I'll go through weeks where I don't look for anything new. And then other times I read something on the internet about a new app or an app that may not be new, but I just hadn't heard of before, and I'll go looking for it. So this might be an interesting thing. We'll have to wait and see how it goes. Another one for you. If you are an Apple Map user, that is to say, you use Apple Maps quite a bit, one of the things that you may be um, happy to find out is that Apple Maps now has a little bit more data about parking structures that have open parking spaces by partnering with an outfit called Parkopedia. Now, this started rolling out apparently in the U.S. A little earlier this year, and it's gradually going uh, into more and more countries. But the whole idea is when you pull up the map, you will be able, excuse me, you'll be able to pull up some information about parking structures that are available in your area that have empty spaces. Let me just get this blown up, and I'll show you. This was their picture about what that kind of demonstrated things. As you can see from the map here, here are some of the parking structures, and this looks like in parts of Arizona, where it showed you some of the parking structures that were available and how many parking spots there were in that particular structure. That's going to be of interest to a lot of people if you live in a large enough metro area to have a number of parking structures available to you, that's probably going to be very helpful to some people. If you're in a more rural area where there are fewer structures, it may not be quite as much of a help to you. I saw another thing on Cult of Mac that talks about a new startup company that's going to be trying to compete with iCloud. And at least one of the people involved in this startup uh, worked at Apple for a while on iCloud and some of the related services. And essentially, what this boils down to is to try to develop a cloud based system. I looked at their website, and what they're trying to do is develop a cloud based system that's a little easier to understand and to find your stuff on. Uh, they apparently have the idea that a lot of people just really don't quite understand iCloud and similar cloud related services. And they've got a little bit different take on things to try to make it a little bit easier. There is an app in the App Store right now, in the iOS App Store. Uh, I have not played with it yet. I don't. This, I think, right now is kind of, they were focusing primarily on photos as part of a way of demonstrating it, but it wouldn't be limited to that. They have some features, private sharing and things like that. Some of the things in it remind me of kind of a souped up version of Mobile Me, if you remember that, where you had a way to share a link with somebody um, and share that privately. Some of you may say, well, this is Dropbox. Well, we'll have to wait and see. I'm going to want to tinker with it a little bit before I make a decision about it. I think the idea though is to make it easier to use and easier to understand. We'll see how well that works. It'll be interesting to see. If you're a big Cult of Mac fan, you may also notice that in this current edition on their site, they have quite a bit about the Apple Car that's been rumored off and on for a while. That's interesting. Uh, Take a look at that as well. And one of the other rumors to come out, and once again, this is from an article on Cult of Mac. I'm not sure I would put this one in the class of rumor, okay? Because my bet is that someone is working on this. This particular rumor basically says that by 2018, iPhones will be using retinal uh, identification, your retina pattern identification, instead of thumbprints. Now, obviously, I don't know what Apple's plans are, but if you've gone to your ophthalmologist recently and had them do the retinal scan in lieu of a dilated eye exam, you can see how detailed those can be. And as soon as I saw one, my brain said it won't be long before this is in cell phones, iPads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The story from Cult of Mac basically suggests that Apple will have it out sometime in 2018, but that Samsung may have something out as late as later this year, before the end of 2016. So we'll see. And before you start screaming and say, well, why doesn't Apple get it out the door first? Let me remind you something about that, about the way things have worked a lot of times at Apple. If you look at some of Apple's most popular devices, and I mean the ones that everybody seems to own, okay, they were not necessarily first on the market with them, but then they were maybe the second or third manufacturer to get involved. But then they did it in such a way that it caught people's attention. And I'll just give you an example. the word iPod. iPod now has become almost synonymous with MP3 player, particularly among people who do not know uh, that there are different brands available. It's kind of like the way that Xerox became synonymous with copying machine, and Coke, for example, becoming almost synonymous with soda. So it to me, it's not as important whether Apple gets this feature out first one out the door. I think the issue that will determine this in terms of success or failure is going to be two things. How does it perform in terms of speed, and how does it perform in terms of accuracy? In other words, if I have my phone locked with a retinal scan, can I very quickly unlock it? Either in an emergency situation or for other reasons, can I very quickly unlock this thing? That's going to be the issue that that I think is going to determine more than anything how well this works. And as you can see, I'm dragging that over. There's there's their take on this article. I have a link to that as well in the show notes. And finally, the last thing I want to mention to you real quickly, our good buddy Kirk McLaren, aka Kirk the iTunes guy, has a link on his website up about an article that he wrote for Macworld discussing AirPlay. And you know that AirPlay has been around for a while, and I really had not thought of this, paid attention to it very much. But AirPlay has been around in one form or another longer than I thought. He traces AirPlay back to AirTunes, which worked with iTunes at the time, and that dates back to about 2004. The reason that AirPlay is mentioned at all is because you can do things with AirPlay, like uh, you've got a lot of choice of devices in terms of sending something sound to your speakers over AirPlay. Some amplifiers and receivers have AirPlay built into them. There are a number of other devices that use that can use AirPlay, and his article is a good overview, especially if you're thinking about buying new gear. It gives you some ideas of why you might want to look at AirPlay enabled receivers, for example. So that's a good read to kind of relax a little bit. It's not a very long article, and it's not overly technical. You'll be able to get through it pretty quickly and understand it, even if you don't really consider yourself a very tech savvy kind of reader. That's one of the things I like about a lot of Kirk's articles. Uh, you can, some of them require varying degrees of technical knowledge, but you can usually boil the gist of them down to something that can be understood by just about anyone. And that's always a handy thing to have. And it looks like we've hit the end of my notes for this week, folks. Um, just about that's most of the topics that I wanted to hit with you and talk about just a little bit. Um, we've had quite a few things come up in the Apple world. You know, if you'll notice this week, I did not mention either the Sierra beta or the iOS 10 beta. I have made up my mind. I'm not going to talk about those until they get closer to release date. You can find a lot of information about them already. Cult of Mac has quite a bit of information, and there's a number of other sites. I think there's been some stuff in Mac World, a few others. But I personally am not going to touch it for a while until I'm running it now. And don't take the fact that I'm not commenting on it to mean either good or bad. It's simply a matter of I'm going to wait and hold off on some of the tips and tricks and things like that until we get a little closer to the release date. And so that's going to just about do it for me this week, folks. I hope that you found some useful information in here. We'll have the show notes up shortly after the show with the links to all the information that we talked about. I hope that you'll join us next week. And until then, thank you. This has been your host, Sylvester Rock, aka Sly Dude. If you have a question, look for me in the forum during the week and post in our show thread, our Sunday video chat thread, and if there's a topic you would like me to talk about or something of that nature, let me know. And until next week, we'll see you again, guys. Thanks for joining us.